power of social media, and it's a great power. Being able to express yourself is really powerful, but with that power comes great responsibility, right? Because ultimately, when you're in the space, you leave digital footprints. What is the footprints that are going to be etched in the sense of time that you want to leave? Because you can't take it back. It's done. You can go back and delete it, but people have screen grabbed it, screen matched it, and can be used to haunt you. And that's the abuse of the power that you have, because some people use it to bully people or push agendas that are really irrational. So that's kind of like the filter I use whenever I use social media. I essentially make sure that whatever I say is something that it will stay true to who I am, to my values or my value system, because it lives on beyond that moment when you actually press send, tweet, post, like or favorite. It lives on beyond that moment. So there is that ripple effect that it creates depending on what you say and how you say it. So you gotta really be careful of the dangers of not saying something that you're gonna regret saying ultimately. And as much as we have freedom of speech, is the freedom of speech in violation of someone else's rights? Is your right superseding someone else's right? So that is a question that you consciously have to make when you have that moment to read what you're about to put out there.
People don't understand the power of freedom of speech, and they don't understand social media. So the thing is, people tend to abuse social media's ability to give you freedom to voice your opinion, and to the detriment of someone else. And then that will end up in, like, if there could be a regulatory thing like the FPB, Film and Publication Board for TV, but that would regulate social media. I think that would give us a sense of understanding, let people understand like social media and what like the power of freedom of speech is, so that they can not.
I hear you, but wouldn't that take away the freedoms?
Well, I guess...
Shouldn't you self-filter?
The thing is, people don't understand that. Like, a lot of people don't understand that. Hence we've got these situations of Sunday afternoon Black Twitter situations. You know what I mean? When you're trending for all of the wrong reasons.
But are they the wrong reasons?
Clive Naidoo thought he was doing something nice, something great that would showcase how everyone is actually, like how the police officer is being a nuisance or a problem, and actually recorded the whole situation. And what happened? It turned around and bit him in the ass. You get my point? So, like, you can never be right on Black Twitter. You can never be right on social media.
I didn't know you were talking about this Penny Sparrow thing. I thought you were saying just generally Black Twitter is, like, against brands, against people, against stuff. So I'm just trying to think. I'm just trying to rationalize or gather, insights in terms of what you're trying to say, or with regards to positioning Black Twitter. Because for me, there's a lot of things to consider. Main thing is, and to Tando's point around, our country has a history, right? Our country has a huge fundamental history that we can't just like ignore. It is there, it is real, and it's more real for a lot of people than it is for someone who's employed, educated, and can make a living. It's really, really harsh conditions. A lot of these people are not the people on Twitter, right? But their anger exists, and there's this anger that comes across in terms of when people express themselves, and then they're not thinking about what they're saying because it is that irrational part of them, that emotional thing that takes over, and then they're just saying what comes to mind, right? And that's, you know, that's unfortunate, because you have to say, okay, cool, if I'm gonna be angry at this moment and I'm gonna say whatever I need to say, you can't do it on a public forum, because there's a huge audience, 55 million, that's just South Africa, and the billions that is the world, who potentially can see this thing if you don't actually are not educated in terms of how to use social media, in terms of changing your settings, making your profile private, so that whoever sees it is in your private network, is in your private sphere of influence. Then, you know, begs the question, right? Yeah, it begs the question. Besides people screen grabbing, which you have allowed to join your sphere of influence, you know, and I think there's another thing about the sphere of influence, because, you know, I believe because of our heritage or ancestry, right? We are communal beings. You know, we always want to belong in this bigger community. You know, this social media becomes like you know, you have your South Africa, which is like a little village, and then we have this global village, right? And you belong to this bigger community, you know. And it's a need to, you know, to belong somewhere. Like, I think the whole thing of our wiring as human beings is that we have this notion, or this need for not being lonely, having to share stuff, having to speak to someone, you know. And I think that's why people go crazy when they're in isolation in prison, because you need someone to speak to, you need someone to connect with. I think these human connections are important, but, you know, then we forget with these human connections that we might say things that are offensive to other people, or we haven't reconciled things with ourselves to understand that your fellow man might find this offensive because of these reasons, which means you haven't dug deep in understanding where you live, the context that you come from, you know, to not erase the past, to acknowledge it, to say, you know, this deep history that we have, right, is very, very sensitive.
Yeah, and also
it's very sensitive, because, you know, a lot of things are not where they should be.
Yeah,
they're not how they should be. 21 years and the dial hasn't shifted in the positive enough, you know, to be more inclusive, to be more transformed, to be all those different things. But, you know, you can't neglect that and just openly say, hey, let's move on, it's done. You can't. And that's why I'd say, like, things like Twitter, you know, it's not about a political agenda. It's not about, it's they're sensitive to those things that, you know, there's the responsibility for brands. Because even as an individual, you are a personal brand, right? There's a responsibility for brands and for individuals, for communities to be mindful of people's histories, experiences, and perceptions. That they can't take those for granted.
Just to sum up that answer, hashtag fees must fall.